I have had a adjunct faculty position at the Hebrew Union College for a few years, 4 or 5 years, 15 years ago, and the last 3 or 4 years lately, where I teach third-year rabbinic students about sermons. And long before it was a likely outcome, I assigned my students at HUC the sermon task of writing all different kinds of what we call situational sermons. The installation of a new board, or some, God forbid, and also the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, there are some of the opinion that I give a sermon from only a political party's point of view, and I'm here to tell you that there are times that one party or the other agrees with a Jewish understanding of an issue. My goal is always to approach the topic from the Jewish perspective, the Reformed Jewish perspective, and not from a political party. When I assigned that topic to my students, I reminded them that the Jewish understanding of the topic is what we are authorized to convey. So when I tackled the issues surrounding gun control, I explained to them, I never said that the Jewish perspective would outlaw all gun ownership, and nor did I connect with a political party. In fact, Judaism supports the use of a weapon if it is to save a life, particularly in self-defense. When I think of this morning's Torah portion, I am grateful each year to return to a thought-provoking message that reminds us that God puts before us life and death, blessing and curse. And then in Deuteronomy 31, it says, "Therefore choose life, that you and your descendants shall live." Our movement selected this portion so that the idea of free choice and free will would be highlighted on this day of repentance, a day when our liturgy teaches us to be inscribed in the book of life for another year. We learn that God puts before us the myriad of possibilities regarding how we treat others, how we treat ourselves, and how we connect with our Creator, and how to embrace blessing rather than curse. Even though it makes a wonderful slogan for a political approach against abortion, the context of this verse has nothing to do with abortion specifically. Rather, it reminds us that we have choices to make, and by doing so, we can affect the quality of our lives and those around us. Let's see what happens here. Good. I have to tell you that the phrases pro-life and pro-choice are needlessly polarizing. There are very few people I know who are not in favor of life. And the co-opting of the phrase pro-life to signal a self-righteous understanding of abortion is reprehensible. And the idea of pro-choice is similarly difficult because it would suggest that wanting to keep abortion legal and safe is not about life, but about the cavalier decision made routinely. Judaism teaches us to value life. After all, the first mitzvah in all of the Torah is pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply. We also read in Exodus 21, 22, and 23, when men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, no other damage ensues, the one responsible for knocking the pregnant woman shall be fined according to as the husband reckons. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand. This verse is the basis for our understanding of the fetus, which has value, but it is not considered a human life yet. The Talmud teaches us that the fetus is potential life and must be highly regarded. It codifies that life, when It codifies that life begins when the majority of the fetus emerges from the mother. It also says, if a woman is in labor and has a life-threatening difficulty, one dismembers the fetus within her, removing it limb by limb, for her life takes precedence over its life. This would make the fetus a pursuer of the woman's life, and ending the pregnancy is therefore an act of self-defense. Even if one regards the various ways the rabbis of the Talmudic period define when life begins, the fetus is of lesser status than the pregnant woman. Judaism does not believe that life begins at conception. A fetus is very important, and therefore potential life begins at conception, but even then there are stages of viability with which were identified generations ago through our tradition that suggest that nothing is more important than the mother until that head appears. It also says, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the Jewish way that we should protect. It is also the way I am thinking about the moment that we find ourselves in right now. We once had the pleasure of living next door to a devout Catholic family. We found that our two families shared many, many common values. Our kids enjoyed time together, as did both families. When there was an anti-Semitic moment in the school that all of our children were attending, the mom of the family was quick to come over to us and ask what she could do to help. As time went on and as people have discussions, we became curious as to how they might be handling, thinking about, and even who they might be voting for in the coming election. Our neighbor made clear that they understood the abortion issue to be the most important issue about which they vote. And true to form, her understanding that life begins at conception made abortion murder of a person. That's her good Catholic upbringing. She fully understood before our discussion that this was not our issue, and it was not an issue that about which we would agree. And she also understood the Jewish view that life did not begin at conception, but when a child actually emerges. And truth be told, it is understandable to me when a Catholic is unable to embrace the right of a woman to have an abortion, even if I don't agree. However, that is not the moment in which we find ourselves. If an abortion is allowed in order to save the mother's life, then Judaism's view of life is sustained. If an unborn fetus has the same status as the mother carrying it, then Judaism's view of life is not sustained. Many of the laws that have been triggered by the overturning of Roe v. Wade have resulted in significant, if not total, restrictions on the termination of a pregnancy, sometimes with the exception to save the mother's life. Our most traditional co-religionists have generally cheered the overturning of Roe v. Wade because they would prefer if abortion was rarely, if ever, used, and they have specific situations that would categorize the fetus as a pursuer of the life of a pregnant woman. Those in the more liberal camp have generally allowed a woman and or her doctors to determine whether her life is in danger, allowing for mental health concerns as well as physical health concerns. As one conservative Jewish commentator wrote, "As I have said many times before, this medical procedure should remain legal so that when halakhically required, it can be easily accessed without fear of violating the law. That many of the states outlawing abortion include an exception when the life of the mother is at risk is of little solace. The fact remains that this exception is subject to wide interpretation. Halakha might differ from a state's interpretation. State legislatures will not look to our poskim, our religious commentators when crafting those laws. It would be difficult to justify an abortion on religious grounds without there being a threat to the mother. Religious communities are responsible for being certain that the values of their religions are clearly taught to their followers. If a religion thinks of an abortion as murder, then the free practice of that faith requires that community to value a pregnancy as the mother is valued. It is clear that Judaism values pregnancy. Remember that commandment to be fruitful and multiply. We value a fetus, but we value the mother more. Once the baby is born, we value the baby and the mother equally. Until the baby is born, the pregnancy may be aborted to save a mother's life. If there is an overwhelming likelihood or even certainty that the pregnancy will result in the pregnant woman's death, we are obligated to remove the pursuer from the woman's life. Obligated. No choice. The choice to freely practice our religion is what makes us choose life and blessing over curse and death. That is the choice. Many people are pro-choice and anti-abortion. I am. I would rather have more babies in our community than fewer. I would rather people not think of abortion as birth control. I would rather protect a woman's right to an abortion and promote the values that make whether a pregnancy must be terminated something based on Jewish tradition, medical necessity, and the freedom to practice our faith without fear of violating civil law. It should not be about which political party has more votes and when. It should be about protecting life, most often protecting the mother's life. And while I am currently free to teach about how Judaism thinks about this issue and free to promote the idea that the attitude toward abortion be left to the so far protected religious diversity that makes this country a home for us Jews, I know that as a male, there is a limit to what I can contribute to this conversation. Promoting a society where doctors perform pregnancy termination procedures for their patients should be all of our goal, provided that that we are all able to recognize that a woman's body is no longer the property of her husband. I'm pretty sure that if women were in a majority in a decision about a law regarding circumcision or prostate removal surgery, whether outlawing or insisting, we would likely see those leaders, those women who outlawed prostate surgery or demand circumcision, those leaders would be the target of angry men who feel that there are parts of their bodies about which women should not be legislating. As a Reformed Jew, I embrace our tradition even when I am electing to be advised by it rather than bound by it. I have spent my life studying and learning about how to think about the world that God created, my role in it, and how to see the world through those Jewish eyes. And when I am a thoughtful and intentional Jew, as I try to be all the time, then I understand the ways that I participate in that reforming process. But I do not reform in order to be a better member of a political party. And I hope you don't either. I love for there to be babies in our midst. I love it when people who want to be pregnant are pregnant, and try to be compassionate and supportive when pregnancy is elusive. However, I also know that until I walk in the shoes of a pregnant woman, even if those shoes are a different size because of bloating, it is not just for me to say. In fact, it is a woman's decision, a woman's issue. Our tradition is similarly limited because generally men have codified it. Men decided when codifying parts of our tradition that there are standards and reasons to end pregnancy, and generally, most women tell me they get it right. However, it was never considered that a fetus should have the same status as a pregnant woman. And that was from men. Until women are in a position to make these laws as the majority passing them, abortion should remain safe and legal and rarely needed. But as some of you leave in a huff today, and God, I hope you don't, please remember this. I am worried about whether we Jews will continue to have the right to freely practice our religion. As it is, some of our temple family are at work or at school today, the most holy day of the year, because they felt that the law allowed them to be here without fear of penalty. But the reality on the ground was that their presence here would signal problems upon their return to work or school. Some of our religion already live in fear that in their neighborhood, if they identify themselves too Jewishly. And yet the more we work to protect our right to be different, to respect differences with those of other faiths, and to engage in discussions that result in understanding, even when an agreement is elusive, the more likely we are to be valued by others. Working to make sure abortion is legal and safe does not make someone pro or anti anything. Rather, it allows for Jews to consult with our higher authority, our tradition, and our God-inspired understanding of life as we balance it with the world in which we live. If abortion were legal and allowed on demand, and a Catholic woman approached me for my opinion on whether her unwanted pregnancy should be terminated, I would politely reply that I am friends with Father Alex at St. James Catholic Church, who I'm sure would be happy to have that discussion with her. It is true that this morning's Torah portion reminds us to choose life. This is not a marketing slogan, but a commandment to understand the value of life, to grapple with the many issues that surround what valuing life means, and for God's sake, making choices that promote life in ways that first value the living. And when we do, we choose blessing over curse, life over death. May we all find our way to a life-affirming year. Amen.